Hello, and welcome to this webinar from the Aegis 360 Business Acumen series. This is fourth in a series of webinars, and today's webinar is on innovation acumen. I'm going to turn it over now. We have two Ohio gentlemen with us today. I'm going to turn it over to Ned Parks, who will introduce Tom and get the show on the road. Ned?
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And if you're listening in afterwards, we're delighted that you're taking your time to listen in. Tom, hello, my friend. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Thanks, Ned. It's really great to see you. I'm sorry we can't reach through the screen and shake hands, but it's good to see you nonetheless.
Exactly. So as Ann said, this is our fourth in the series of business acumen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is. And our focus today is going to be on innovation. I'm the owner and founder of Aegis 360 Consulting. We've been in business now for 20 years. What a year to celebrate 20, but whatever. We were going to have a big party and everything, and I guess that's not going to happen. But anyway, we're going to continue this into next year. We haven't put the schedule out yet, but we will. Also, we are recording this, and it will be on our YouTube channel. And at the end, I will put that in the discussion area, so you can grab that, and then you can go listen to any of the Acumen series. So I'm Ned Parks, and my friend Tom Merrill, master facilitator with ExperiencePoint. ExperiencePoint is just a fascinating company out of Toronto. I'm delighted that I'm able to have a relationship with them as one of their partners. Tom is actually a full-time employee with them, and they really have specialized in the area of innovation and creativity, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what that looks like and kind of how they got there and those sorts of things. So what is this thing called business acumen? I do a lot of training and consulting in the strategy space, a lot of training in the financial space and the strategy space, and I use other simulations as well. And the term business acumen is thrown around a lot, and it's been fascinating to me anyway, that so many people I talk to, when they hear business acumen, their brains immediately go to finance. And I will tell you, while that is a component of business acumen, it is not the whole thing. So we've come up with this definition that it's really the idea that we can connect all the disciplines of running a business to make really good decisions at the end of it. I mean, that's the definition that I've come up with. As you take a look at this, we've got these different areas. We've got finance, which is one of them. Today, we're focused on innovation, creativity, leadership and employee development, product, service, and delivery. That would be, you know, how well are we doing with our process, internal process? Are we getting the products through as fast as we can? What about our marketing and sales function? That has to occur. As a friend of mine says, who is an expert in sales training, he said nothing happens till a sale is made, and I love that because he's so right. The business strategy piece, the human resources piece, and then our whole organizational culture. So these are really the different things that we need to be good in order to and well versed in order to make good business decisions. And today we're focused on the innovation side of the house. You know, for years, we've had people call us on the phone and say, please do some innovation, creativity training. And we've gotten somebody in there who's some creative, they're a musician or they're an artist or they're something, and we have them draw pictures and play with toys, and then we wonder why they're not creative. Tom, you've seen this, you're cracking up. Now, keep in mind, what I didn't tell you about Tom is not only is he a musician, he also ran the Innovation Center at Xavier University. So Tom's seen this whole innovation thing from cradle to grave, right? I mean, or at least current. So you've seen this happen 1,000 times, right, Tom?
Yeah, you know, and there are so many different flavors of what people think innovation is out there, and it, you know, really, it's a challenging area to enter into, to let alone master.
Yeah, it really is. And so we do that, and then we wonder, well, what the heck is going on? And then we shift, and the leaders go, oh my God, just would you, for crying out loud, just think out of the box, and here, be creative. There, I've given you I've blessed you, be creative, now go forward. And that doesn't work either. We've just left them going, that's great, but I'm not really sure how. And then we have cultural pieces, and we have fears about failure, and we have all this kind of stuff. Now we have an answer. We have design thinking. If you've not heard of design thinking, you're about to learn a lot about it today. And let me just say that I've got here the 6 or 7 step process. And the reason I have that up there is because I know about a 7th step that Tom feels passionate about that's not actually listed here. And I happen to agree with him on that. But Tom, could you give us a little, before you get into that, a little history of design thinking and talk about IDEO a little bit and just some of those examples, and then bring it forward to ExperiencePoint and their connections, just so we give some context.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and people get a little bit confused that when they hear the term design thinking, and lately we've been calling it human-centered thinking or human-centered design, they get a little confused because they go, well, like, I'm not a designer. I don't know how to design products. And really, where we try to coach people is it's more about how to think like a designer in order to innovate. Let me go back to the beginning, sort of this whole thing. There's an outfit at Stanford called the D School. D is short for design. When they first started, about 30 years ago, they brashly called themselves the Stanford D School, and the president at the time said, "Hey guys, you can't call yourselves a school. You don't offer any degrees." And after they were endowed for about $20 million, he said, "Well, I don't care what you call yourselves. You just keep doing what you're doing. That's great work." And they really, a number of professors at Stanford were really tired of seeing students just do what they were supposed to do, solve the problem, put the right peg in the right hole. There was very little notion of this whole creative process or really insightful work. And so they, with one another and with their students, started down this road to really say, how do we innovate in a way that makes a profound difference for the people that we're designing for? And when I say designing, I don't mean product design. Design thinking can address, of course, products, but also services and systems. And so it has a really wide range of applications. And they started doing this work and started noticing really remarkable things come out of the D School, so much so that the Kelly brothers, Tom and David Kelly, thought, you know, there's really something to this. And they founded the design firm IDEO, I-D-E-O. And the 6-step process you see there in front of you, we are at ExperiencePoint really great partners with IDEO, and we've worked together. This is the framework that IDEO uses with all their clients. If you don't know IDEO, you probably know some of their customers and some of their customers' successes. So the very first laptop hinge was a project between IDEO and IBM. The Swiffer product from Procter & Gamble here in my hometown of Cincinnati was a project between IDEO and Procter & Gamble. And so they use these techniques to really help companies, organizations, nonprofits. IDEO has a whole nonprofit arm. These techniques work across every industry, every nonprofit. When I was at my university, I taught design thinking at the undergrad and grad level, and students loved this. They loved having to look, the ability, what it gives you, what design thinking gives you is the ability to really look at a problem with a different lens. And as Ned mentioned, often where we begin is empathy, is really understanding the problem we're trying to solve from our user's point of view. And so there are a number of different techniques that we would use to sort of understand our users at that point of view. And where we begin in design thinking is there, really. Those first 3 phases that you see, framing a question, gathering inspiration, and synthesizing for action, are all about understanding the problem and understanding how our users are interacting with the problems. So we're really doing a deep dive into the people that we're solving for, and there are very specific techniques that we go through to do that. And really, that's, the average length of engagement with an IDEO team with one of their clients is about 4 months, and those first 3 steps could take 3 to 8 weeks. I mean, they really, really do a deep dive in understanding both the problem and the user. The second 3 steps that you see there are really then about finding the solution. So often, we're presented with a problem and we think, oh my gosh, I've got the answer, let's go do it. And that doesn't happen in design thinking. In design thinking, you really focus on the people that you're solving for and really understand the problem from their point of view. And once you have a more refined and nuanced understanding of the people, then you begin with a brainstorm or a series of brainstorms, and then you go through some prototyping and testing. And the ultimate goal, of course, is to get an MVP, a minimally viable product or service or system, where you actually begin to pilot it. But even before we start with framing a question, and Ned mentioned earlier, there is this empathy piece, and you really have to go into this process not only with an open mind, but an open heart, and really be willing to temporarily let go of what you know and believe, and really start to understand the thing you're trying to do from your user's point of view. And when I say user, I'm talking about a person. Design thinking or human-centered design really is focused on that. And at its heart, it's an innovation tool. Ned, you asked me to talk a little bit about ExperiencePoint. ExperiencePoint was founded over almost 25 years ago now by 2 Canadians. And one was really great at gaming. He actually went to Stanford, did some work at the D School, interned for a while at IDEO. The other guy was really into business management and also had a penchant for gaming. And their first product was around change management. And that's still one of their core products today. Matter of fact, I just finished last night the third night of a change management simulation with some folks from all over the world. And soon they found that actually one of the partners who was working with IDEO pitched them, while he was in graduate school, hey, we should do a design thinking simulation. And they kind of laughed. And he said, oh, no, let's do it. And so they actually created a design thinking simulation. And it's been through several different formulations, but it's also now one of our top products that Ned and others throughout the globe facilitate on a weekly basis. And we're delighted to help others understand the design thinking process. I think I've talked enough, Ned. I better turn it back over to you.
That's all right. Tom, I wanted to tackle the empathy piece. After I went to Toronto, where Tom and I met, and I went through a week of training up there to be a partner with ExperiencePoint and be able to facilitate this process, my very first client was a rather large organization, and they have 21 cemeteries. And so we walked them through the process, and I said, okay, now let's, they learned it, and we walked them through the case studies, which is one of the things we do. And I said, okay, now let's spend the other half of the day and work on a project that you have. And it was fascinating because they said, well, we get people that are really upset come certain dates when we clean up the cemetery and take all the decorations off after certain people put Easter and some of these other holidays. So they said, so we got to go through these 6 steps. And I said, why don't we go through step number 1? Let's talk about the empathy piece. And we had about an hour-and-a-half conversation solely around empathy of what the people were feeling when their decoration left. And was interesting, Tom, because I said, I get why you have to hold to your date. I understand the mechanics of this. That's not what's in question here. Let's understand how it impacts them and what we can do different to try to educate them. You're not going to change the date. That's probably not going to happen because you have to clean up the cemetery. And it changed the entire conversation for them for the rest of as they went forward to try to fix that particular problem they were having. So Tom, after the empathy piece, which we've talked about, we get into framing the question. And, I've always been in love with questions. And one of the things I've said all the time is I'd rather have 10 great questions than 1 great answer. And frequently we're asking the wrong question, frequently. And we don't even know it because we're kind of on what I call question autopilot. So could you address briefly, what do you mean by frame the question? Why is that so doggone important? And kind of what do we wind up with by doing this?
Yeah, it's the way I look at it when I was teaching at my university, really framing the question, you could just say that's your thesis statement, right? It's the thing that you want to discover as you go through your research. And it's no different in design thinking, with the possible exception that there's sort of a formula that we use to really help us set about asking the right question. I want to point out that that model that Ned showed you, the 6 or 7 step model, looks pretty linear, but there's actually a lot of going back and forth. And we don't, the initial question that we frame is like the first step on the journey. And there's a lot that we don't know, but this framing question really sets us out on our research agenda. And it's important, there are some important things to know about how we frame a question. And the best way I can describe it is to tell a quick story. Most of you, if you're US based, might know Kroger. Kroger grocery store. Kroger happens to be based here in Cincinnati. And I was working with them a couple years ago on an initiative they have called Zero Hunger, Zero Waste. And the zero waste part they'd been doing pretty well in. So zero waste meant they were controlling waste in their stores, they were controlling waste in their supply chain, working with their suppliers, and they'd actually done a remarkable job and had won several awards on really cutting down on the waste across their value chain. But what up until a couple of years ago had only been sort of a PR term was this zero hunger piece. And they have a heart. They really want to help folks in their community who are struggling with hunger to be better, to have more food, because that's the business they're in. And so they gathered not only Kroger employees, but folks from the Free Store Food Bank here in town and other agencies and individuals who had a passion for this. And we were about 20 people and sitting in a room. And I said, okay, so here's what we do. The first thing you need to define is a user. And the user is never the company. It's always, who are we solving for? Who are the people that we really want to help? Okay. And the next thing you do is you want to define a benefit for that user. And it's not a benefit for the company. You want to define a benefit for the people that you're trying to help. The third thing is you can't bake a solution into your framing question, because the moment that you do that, you've immediately limited any number of possibilities. Design thinking overall has two broad movements. One of diverging, where we create a number of choices and options, and one of converging, that once we've created those options, we begin to choose from among them. So you can imagine if you bake a solution into your framing question, you've immediately narrowed it down so narrow that you're not going to be able to look at other possible game-changing solutions. And so I went through all this and explained everything, and I said, okay, so let's put our heads down, let's get into some groups and start making some questions. And we worked for about 20 minutes, and I said to them, okay, who's got a statement? And one group raised their hand. I said, great, let's hear it. And I said, all right, how might we help Kroger end hunger in Cincinnati by sending food to needy families with driverless vehicles? And as a how might we statement, didn't go over very well. I mentioned, I didn't mention the how might we. All design thinking challenges begin with those three words, how might we? And that might is very special because that opens the door to diverging. It's not how are we going to or how should we. When we say might, we immediately acknowledge that we're looking at many different possibilities. And so if you were paying attention to that how might we statement, the user was Kroger. They baked in a solution that honestly didn't even work yet. Despite what Tesla thinks, I don't think driverless cars are yet going to be on the market. And so after about another 30 minutes or so, we actually came up with an amazing how might we question, which was, how might we help food insecure families living in Kroger communities live healthier lives? So wow. Food insecure families are families that know where some of their meals are coming from, but not all of their meals are coming from. living in Kroger communities doesn't mean you're within blocks of a Kroger, but it's anywhere in a town that Kroger has a presence, any town that Kroger has a presence in. And living healthier lives helped us all understand that hunger isn't this monolithic issue. There are so many issues surrounding it: poverty, education, access to fresh food, all sorts of things. And when we shared that with the C-suite at Kroger, they were like, "This is a great question that's worth asking." And to date, I think they've had over 30 different prototypes that they've been trying. Their goal is that once they find some things that work, they want to spread it out everywhere that Kroger has a presence in the U.S. So really framing this question, Ned, is where we begin. And you don't want it so broad that you're trying to boil the ocean and solve everything at once, or so narrow that you're not going to make an amazing difference for your users.
So as you pointed out, that the wrong question on the front end is going to give you the wrong answer on the back end.
Absolutely.
Almost 100% of the time. Yeah.
You got it.
So then we go to gather this inspiration. It's like, okay, and I've seen them do. They go, what do I do next? So frequently, what has happened in the past is we say, SurveyMonkey. It's awesome. It's cheap. It's great. Let's go ask people, right? Would you do this? Would you do that? So on and so forth. And in design thinking, that is like the Holy Grail of no. That is like, no. Not only is it the Holy Grail of no, but the entire world's going to implode if you even think about doing that. It's a very different model. So we've thrown that out because what, and I'll never forget you saying this when you were teaching in class, what people tell you they're going to do and what they do are usually two different things. And so you guys go to the place.
We do. Not only do we go to the place, but we look at a very different type of individual. So often, people think about, okay, what does the average person do when they do this? And what we say in design thinking about the average person is average people have developed compensatory behavior. So let me take, for instance, this good old-fashioned pizza cutter with a handle. And the first time you've ever used a pizza cutter, maybe you fool around with it, but if you cut a lot of pizza, you don't have to think very often about how to use the handle on the pizza cutter. But imagine you're a 5-year-old and you've never used this thing before, and man, you really want a slice of pizza. Well, you might, if you have the handle too far over, you're going to cut through the top but not cut through the crust. Or if you have the handle too far down, you might be cutting through the whole thing but then dragging the handle through the pizza and making this mess. And so what great designers, so IDEO actually worked with a company in Switzerland called Xylus. They make home kitchen implements. And they asked the question, well, what happens when we take away the handle? And you get this thing that's just this way. So if I'm a professional chef or a home cook or a kindergarten student, the only way I can apply force with this is straight down, and it makes it easier for me, for the kindergarten student, for the professional pizza cutter, all to cut our pizza. That never would have come around if we had just been watching average users, because we all know now how to do this. Those folks of us in the 80%, we've been around pizza cutters for a while. We're maybe not pro chefs, but we know our way around how to get around that awkwardness of the handle. What IDEO does and what we do in design thinking is focus on the extremes. So in this case, they paired professional chefs and kindergarten students and had them make a meal together. And they went into a grandmother's home and watched her granddaughter learn how to make waffles for the first time. And so really got an understanding at the extreme ends of how this worked, and by really understanding how people who were really good at something and people who were brand new to it, they made this amazing line of home kitchen tools. I wonder, warm up your chat fingers, I wonder if you know who cut curbs were originally designed for, those parts of the curb that make a ramp from the street level to the road, from the sidewalk level to the road level. Somebody type in chat, please, if you would. Who were those originally designed for? Those portions of the. Oh, thank you, Lisa. She's on it. Who were those designed for? Yeah, not delivery people. Nope. Nope. Think earlier. Who would make the most use? Ned, do you know?
I
I'm
do.
gonna pick your brain. Let's see. Close.
That's earlier for sure, but not a little too early. Actually, it was done for those in wheelchairs.
It was, and it was in New York City, as a matter of fact, where they saw a gentleman sort of bang down one side of the curb, but when he got to the other side of the street, he had to get two strangers to lift him up to get him to the other side. And so those cut curbs, those portions of the curbs that were originally designed for a very specific use, now look what we've had in the chat. Look how many different people they serve. Delivery people, drivers, moms in strollers, people on rollerblades, skateboarders. Well, skateboarders would probably do something really weird. But, they serve everyone, not just the very distinct people that we studied, but they really help anyone who needs, an elderly person maybe, who needs help getting from sidewalk level to street level. So this gathering inspiration is not sending out a survey, because what you learn from a survey is only what you ask. What you learn when you go gather inspiration is how people are encountering the problem that you're trying to solve. And the best way to do that is really look at extreme users and interact with them. Have what we call an empathy interview with them. Ask them what we call story-evoking questions. Tell me about the first time you ever sliced pizza. Tell me about the first time you ever struggled to cross the street in a wheelchair. Tell me about your best experience in a Ned Parks webinar. Tell me about your worst experience during this whole COVID pandemic. And these stories are the door opener to the user's experience, and then the great interviewer will then dig in with a series of either why questions, so we understand the emotional value behind, or tell me and show me, which gets to the technical aspects of the problem. And we use both of those things to really understand how our user, how the person that we're solving for, feels about the thing that we're after.
One of the examples that is used at ExperiencePoint is they were, and I don't remember the full backstory, but the end was that they asked an elderly lady if she had any trouble getting into her medicine bottle, and she said, "No, I don't have any trouble at all." But her hands were very arthritic. And so they said, "Well, could you show us how you do it?" And she took it to a meat slicer, a commercial meat slicer, and she cut the top off. She said, "No, I don't have any problem getting into it at all." But it's not exactly what they had in mind. The survey would have said, "Hey, nobody has any problem with getting into the pill bottle," but because they had a workaround, which is one of the other big things. So by going and watching, in the world of lean, we call it Gemba, go to the place where the work is performed, right? Let's actually watch and talk and so on and so forth. Well, then we get all this stuff and we do this action thing, right? We're going to synthesize for some action. So give us a brief understanding of what this step calls for, Tom.
Yeah, so when we're out in the field and we're talking and observing our extreme users, we're making observations, and we're making a number of them. We might in a project have hundreds of them, and they're not just, I'm wearing a blue shirt, Ned's wearing a blue shirt, we're both wearing glasses. Yeah, so what? The observations we really want to take note are what seems surprising. Where have people, like Ned just talked about, where have people worked around something that just doesn't work for them? So the woman who has to slice the top of her pill bottle off. And what do people clearly care about? And these are the types of observations that we really want to see. And then once we have a series of those, we go down this road about creating insights. And an insight, if the observation is the what did people do? What did people say? The insight then is the why did they do that, or why did we say that? When we're in the process of gathering observations, we do it from a neutral point of view. We put on these blinders. In the empathy interview, you never say, "Oh yeah, I've had the same experience," or "Oh, I know exactly how you feel." You just listen and ask questions, and it's never about you. It's always about the person you're interviewing. Once you step away from that, now what you know and understand and believe and the team that's working on this problem, and no, please, I say team, it's design thinking is best as a team sport, then the team steps back and begins to sort of take all these notes. When we do this, typically there are hundreds of post-it notes. We start looking at these observations and clumping them together and coming up with some insights, first level insights about why do we think this is happening. And then we'll take a step back and start looking at the insights and notice what patterns and contradictions are occurring and make some deeper level insights on that. So an example might be, there's a kid in Germany who's really proud of his shoes, and somebody said, well, why are you proud of your shoes? And he said, well, you see that scuff mark on my shoes? That scuff mark says I'm one of the best skaters in this town, because you can only get that scuff mark by having a particular angle on your skateboard. And then, so the insight might be, the people are really proud when they've practiced to get something. And then a deeper insight might be, kids don't want instant gratification. They actually want to show that they've mastered a particular style or a particular sport, so they can look to be worthy in their friends' eyes. So there's this process of hearing what they said and seeing what they did, making a first level insight, and then really trying to get to deeper level insights. And once you get to those deeper level insights, you then now have a new and more profound understanding of your user, and you create that how might we question again, but this time with a more specific understanding of your user. And that how might we question, that more refined how might we question, actually, Ned, takes us to the next step, which is generating ideas. And so out of that understanding our users, we might have 3 or 4 new how might we questions, and for every new how might we question, we would do a brainstorm. And my our friends at IDEO are masters at this, and we have a short 15-minute, we call a Spark series, about brainstorming. And brainstorming is a great process, but it's also a difficult one, and you actually have to practice it to be really good at it. And there are a number of rules that our friends at IDEO say, and some of you might know some of them. Go for wild ideas, and the hard part of going for wild ideas is we tend to censor ourselves. We don't want to look funny in front of our colleagues, or we tend to censor other people's ideas. And I might say, Ned, wouldn't that cost too much? Or how's that going to work for our user? And so we have this evaluative part of ourselves that we really have to let go. We also want to come up with, as you see on the board here, a ton of ideas. I love that some of these have little sketches on them. IDEO is very, very insistent on that, on drawing a little sketch on your ideas. If you know improv comedy, you want to use that yes and technique and build on the ideas of others. Ned might say, hey, let's do a circus, and I'll say, yeah, and let's make sure we got cotton candy in there as well, because I know we love that at the circus. Have to stay focused on the topic, really make sure that we're not going too far astray, not honing in on one original idea, but having a wealth of ideas. And all these things really help us then. Here's our second moment of divergence, where the more different and wild ideas we can create, the better we are. Another serious one is deferred judgment. There's no time in a brainstorm to judge. We can judge.
I always say that the best brainstormer is one that's actually taken a workshop on improv, because they really get what's supposed to happen. I went and took a 4-part improv workshop, and I'll never forget, this was the big takeaway for me. It was the yes and always going with. And so I was up doing my role play with somebody else, and I was a car buyer, and my partner, the lady that was in the class, was a car dealer. And so the skit was I was supposed to go up and say, I'm looking to buy a car. So I said, hi, I'm looking to buy a car. That was the opening line. And she said, I have this great car over here with square wheels. Well, where do you go with that, right? and so I immediately went, oh, good, because I want to run down the street as loud as I possibly can, bouncing all over the place, right? And the guy stopped and he goes, yes, that's exactly where we want you to go with this whole improv thing, right? And to me, that's what brainstorming is. It's just one big improv session. It should be fun. We should go ahead and do the crazy, do the wacky, do the fun, throw some comedic in there, but then actually put it on the board, because as we all know, one idea can beget another. So this to me is a really important step. And if people have had a bad experience in brainstorming, they get turned off by this a little bit. And our job as facilitators is to make sure that doesn't happen. One of the other things that ExperiencePoint does is supply us, the facilitators, but you can also do it internally, is when a group gets stuck, we've got some things to unstick it, right? And my favorite one is, okay, come up with an idea about what we're talking about that would get you fired in 2 seconds flat. And it's right. It just opens up everything. It's just like the floodgate, and then all these other ideas come, and then they're back at it again. So you have to really not just suspend judgment, but you have to be courageous, and that's why a facilitator can be so important, because I'll go ahead and do that, and possibly somebody internal might not. So then we go to this whole idea of tangible. And this always cracks me up, because an idea is not something I can hold in my hand, and I always think about tangible as in my hand, right? But in the ExperiencePoint and IDEO and the design thinking world, tangible becomes a picture, and we actually say we want you to draw a picture, a storyboard in pictures. So the tangible becomes visual, and I can actually hold the picture. So once you understand that, it works. So Tom, talk to us a little bit about that 4-window storyboard.
Yeah, we call it building to think, Ned, and it's a really early prototype. And Ned just mentioned the storyboard. There are others, very simple prototypes, and the purpose of these early prototypes are not proof of concept, and they're not validation. The purpose of these early prototypes are really to take them out in front of our user and say, here's our idea. What do you think about this? And so when we've done the insight formation, when we did the brainstorming, we were sort of away and apart from the people that we're designing for. But the reason we make these things tangible and put them into some sort of tangible form is so that we ourselves and the people that we're designing for can actually give us constructive feedback. And it's interesting. I'll tell a quick story. Some of you of a particular age might remember the Palm Pilot, one of our early electronic assistive devices. I'm guessing somebody throw in chat, Lisa or Daisy, you guys are active in there. What do you think the first Palm Pilot prototype cost to manufacture, and how long did it take them? Thanks, Lisa. You're quick on the keyboard. I really appreciate that. I see that Lisa's typing, and Daisy's on it as well. $2,000 US, 5,000 says Daisy. Yep. So I will tell you, it was whatever the going cost for a small block of wood is and a golf pencil, because the founder of the Palm Pilot was thinking, all right, he walked around for a week with a block of wood and a golf pencil. And every time that he thought he might use this digital assistant, he would write it out. And people would look at him in meetings, and he was explaining what he was doing. And he realized that the 4 things he really wanted this device to do was to keep track of his contacts, to help him email, to keep a calendar, and to keep some tasks. And so if you ever used one of those things, I did a number of years ago, those were the 4 main things that you would do: calendar, tasks, email, and contacts. And if you think about it, that's where we eventually got with cell phones. And it was nothing more than a super expensive block of wood and a golf pencil. But it made people, and people got into it. They say, "Hey, what you going to do with your block of wood pilot today?" And it really helped understand when he would need that. And it was just a very simple thing. Storyboard, the same thing. When we write down how our user are going to interact with our idea, by making that story real, it invites us to say, I wonder how that would work, or what happens when we do this, or what's our biggest assumption that we're making here. Speaking of making big assumptions, Ned, I think that that gets us to our next slide. Yeah, so go ahead.
So, I will tell you that, and these are my words, so please don't extend it to either IDEO or anybody else, but I always say the first holy grail of design thinking is do not go to a survey. That's holy grail number one. Holy grail number two is this one right here. Less than $100, less than an hour. If you're going to do $5,000 in 6 weeks, you've already busted the entire process. You might as well not have started the process because you've just destroyed the process. The whole idea is less than $100, less than an hour. So the one case study that I share with people all the time, Tom, and I know you know it, is a case study of the company, the large, it doesn't matter what kind of a company it was, they wanted to go much more green and sustainable. And they multi-layered office, campus, 3,000, 4,000 employee places, it's like their own city. And so they go, we're going to do ceramic coffee cups and all the styrofoam's going to go away. Great idea. Certainly can't argue with that. And in theory, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But instead of doing a company-wide change overnight, they said, well, let's do a little prototype. Let's practice this a little bit. Let's see what actually is going to happen. So they went and they took the styrofoam cups and they put them in the cabinet and they put the ceramic cups out and they put literally, I love this, they didn't make a pretty sign. They just scratched out a note, again, say, let's do this. Please use the ceramic cups and put them back in the sink or the dishwasher or whatever when you're done. And then they sat back and they watched. The next morning, styrofoam cups were out and the ceramics were nowhere to be found. Which just cracks me up because it's like, yep, I've seen this happen 1,000 times, right? What they didn't take into account is the janitorial staff. They took one look at this and said, oh, I don't think so. I'll be picking up ceramic cups all over the place. My workload just tripled. They were not in opposition to the idea of being more green. They were in the opposition to what it was going to do to them. And so they identified a very serious problem literally for less than $100 or less than an hour kind of mentality. And then they were able to address that problem and ultimately move to where they wanted to go, but they had some kinks to work out before they got into it. And it helped them design their process and maybe the policy around it and some of those other things. That to me is the test piece, which I think is so important. And it's fascinating to me, Tom, that our clients don't take us serious when we say this. They go, you can't possibly test this for $100. We've got to spend $5,000, $6,000, or $7,000. No, you really don't. You really don't. And that to me is just so important.
Yeah, and there's this whole, so the more, and there are sort of three broad phases of prototyping. There's learning, there's evolving, and there's validating. And the things that you do in validating, you would never do in learn, and vice versa. And so it's a journey. But the more experiments you do early on, rather than starting with one idea and say, oh, this is it, let's go, let's go, let's go, and then you get to validate and it's a bust and you've spent thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars and months on it and to no avail. Whereas if you start in this frame of mind of we're going to experiment our way into evolve, and you do little experiments as you go, and you're testing with users and learning early on what works and what doesn't, you'll have a better chance at the end of having a product that really wows people.
And from an organizational culture standpoint, I really need to put this in there. If the culture of your organization is one where failure is not accepted at any level, this is going to be really hard for you. This is a cultural mind shift that has to happen at the very top. Please go fail wildly with the $100 an hour. Fail epically. Make it an absolute total bust. Because if you do it there, you won't do it where it really matters. I call it tuition. That's what I call it. This is a really cheap tuition to learn, right? Because that other tuition is really big. Let's use one that, gosh, I think everybody is familiar with. Coke, and they're coming out with the new Coke. How expensive was that little tuition price? Holy criminy, I don't think they got 3 batches out before that had tanked totally. And the world said, what in the hell are you doing? Have you lost your minds? And clearly they had lost their minds. They didn't, I don't know what step they missed here, but they certainly didn't do this one. And there's tons of examples of this. Really respected, well-run companies with bright people make this mistake. And I say, if you don't have a culture for failure, then you instantly do not have a culture for innovation. Because you cannot have one without the other. You cannot. It is impossible. It is absolutely impossible. So we've got to, I always say, maybe it's an 8-step process. I got to get you over the fear of some failure and let you figure out how to do that before we even start down this road. And that to me is so important. I'm not suggesting that leaders just have a willy-nilly approach to it and let them fail at whatever they want. We can certainly manage the risk, which is part of what this is. We're going to risk $100 in an hour of our time or something very akin to that, clearly. And so if we'll go down that road and then celebrate the failure, hey, this didn't work, and here's why, and it led me here, sometimes it leads us down to something way better. I mean, to me, it's just so culturally driven. I even believe that sometimes design thinking is so well suited to just get people starting to think in this mindset. It somewhat is a cultural shift, right, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the companies we work with has embraced this so much that there's one particular meeting they have every week, and everybody has to bring their biggest failure of the week into the meeting. And they start with that. They say, here's my biggest failure. And the people who don't are like, they're razzed, and they say, no, come on, you have to have failed at something. And they build it into the culture, and it's really, it's an amazing thing. At our innovation center at my university, the one classroom we had in the building was called the Failure Lab. And when students walked in, they're like, wow, wait a minute, no, I don't want to do that. And, we also housed startups until they got to a certain size. And one of the CEOs, a great guy, didn't like that language of failure. You've maybe heard fail fast, fail cheap. And
right.
He said to me, Tom, we have 2 modes. We are succeeding or we're learning. And so if failure makes you nervous, just say fail means we're learning. We're learning what doesn't work. We learn how not to do it. And so now we're going to go learn another thing. And it's just learn, succeed. Learn, succeed.
I was a helicopter pilot in the Army and a flight instructor, and I specifically taught what we called combat flying. It was the area that I taught in the school, and one of the things that was taught in there was low-level navigation with the helicopter, and you had to do your route exactly right, or you could fly over in our world, in the school world, the mythical enemy, but it could have turned into the real enemy. And I get a student out there, and they'd be navigating along, and they'd get lost, and just keep going. And I used to say, I bet I said this 1,000 times. I said, I would rather you fail with an act of commission than an act of omission. For God's sakes, do something. Turn, stop, hover, land. I don't care what you do, even if it's wrong. I can promise you, motoring on is the worst wrong you can have out of all of them. Because you not only do you not know where you are now, you further don't know where you are when you keep going. At least if I stay here in orbit, I could figure it out or do something. And I'll bet I've said that 1,000 times. And I've also said, let's fail forward. Right, and I'm certainly not I didn't coin that phrase, but I believe it. And if we want to call them a learning lab, based upon failure, I don't really care if the word bothers you. It doesn't matter. But the culture has to be there that when somebody attempts to do something, we're okay with it. And forget the innovation piece just for a moment. I've had leaders say, I want people that work for me that'll take initiative. Okay. But when they take initiative and they don't do exactly the way you want it done, and then you beat them up for it, it's the last initiative they're ever going to take. Right? They're going to stop taking any other initiative. You know what? I saw that trip hazard out there, but I moved the cord, and then I got in trouble for moving the cord because it wasn't my cord. So you know what? I don't care if people fall and break their nose. It's not my problem. I'm not going to get in trouble anymore. They go in defensive posture mode, and we just can't afford to do that. It just doesn't work. We've got to get around that thinking somehow.
Absolutely.
Well, as they used to say on Car Talk, you've wasted another hour of your time. One of my favorite radio shows of all. I would like to believe that you have not wasted an hour of your time. I don't believe that you have. I hope that we've shared something with you along this whole line of innovation in the workplace. And it is, to me, it is a key component of having good business acumen, because with this comes the financial stuff and all the rest of it. And for those of you that are thinking, this sounded warm and it sounded fuzzy and it sounded cute, how does this translate into real things like success and dollars and Tom, you mentioned a couple of times it's not only products. I very interested if you could share the Bank of America story, which was not, it was a financial product, yes, but that to me falls into the service world, and it created this entire new thing. And if you could just briefly share that so people really understand this isn't just about a pizza cutter. This is really something very different.
Yeah, Bank of America, a number of years ago, around the time that debit cards were being introduced, really wanted to encourage their customers to use the debit card, because every time they did, Bank of America would get a little cut from it. And so they hired IDEO to come in and help them out. And IDEO said, oh, okay, well, what have you done so far? And they said, oh, well, we're printing money clips with the Bank of America logo on them, and it's got a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Clip on it, so you can clip your money together. And they said, oh, that's really interesting. Why did you do that? And they said, well, one of our senior vice presidents uses a Bank of America money clip, and he thinks it'd be a great way to send it out to our customers to help them to love us. And they went, oh, okay, well, let's go do our thing. And so they actually went out and observed extreme Bank of America users. And what they noted was, in that day when we used to write checks to pay our bills, they noticed this behavior where some people were rounding up their checks to the next whole dollar. And some people did it because it was faster to write out 30 in a line than $27.46. And some people did it like if they were paying their utility bill, they thought they'd always have a credit and they'd feel safe about not having their utilities turned off. Some people did it because it was just easier to balance their checkbook. They thought if everything was in whole numbers. And so IDEO went through their process and they helped Bank of America, they capitalized on this learning, and they helped Bank of America create this program called Keep the Change. So anytime that you would use your Bank of America debit card, the bank software would automatically round up that purchase price to the next whole dollar. And the entire difference, Bank of America wouldn't take a cut of that, would go into your own savings account. And so if you used your debit card 2 or 3 times a day, you might get, maybe $1, or at the end of a week, $7, $8, $10, end of a month, $50, $60, $70, a year, several $100s. Well, this program grew so popular with not only the target audience that they were interested in, but all of Bank of America customers, that at the end of the 3rd year of the program, and it's still going on, it netted an additional $2 billion, that's with a B, dollars to BOA's bottom line assets. Not because they sent them little Bank of America money clips, but because they took the time to understand the needs of the customer, and they made it easy for their customers to save, desirable to save, didn't have to think about it, and there's real value there.
That reminds me too of, and I don't know if this was an IDEO customer or not, or if they were a part of this, but I remember when TurboTax first came out, and this is a long, long, long time ago. And Intuit, I believe Intuit, had this brilliance of, let's stand around, and of course in those days in Office Max, when you used to buy your software there, right? Let's stand around, and if somebody buys one, let's see if they can get us to it. Today you'd get the cops called on you. We'll offer to go to their house and watch them set up, which they did. They said, if you'll let us just observe you go through getting this whole thing set up, we'll give you the software for free. And they learned everything from packaging to instructions to just by watching. I think one of the first things is they had this shrink wrap around it, and people were taking these knives and cutting, so they did a little pull thing like you had on the old cigarette pack, right? And then they'd have instructions that to the person that wrote it made all the sense in the world. To the person that didn't know what they were talking about, they were going off into la la land. It was a huge success for them, and they made very rapid changes to their product to make it more user-friendly. And to me, Tom, that goes back to step one, which is minus step one, right? Which is that empathy thing. And I cannot emphasize enough That empathy doesn't mean I let people walk all over me. It means I pay attention to what my customer needs and wants and what they're actually doing. And then I service that client. I give them something. It doesn't, I could sell it to them. Look what Bank of America did, $2 billion additional deposits to their bank. That's not exactly chump change, for crying out loud.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Tom, thank you a million for being here. I appreciate your time and your expertise, and it is really, really helpful. And oh, by the way, I need to, yeah, I know. One other thing, Ohio connection here. Tom, tell us where the brothers were originally from IDEO.
Oh, was it Dayton?
Barberton, Ohio, right outside of Akron.
Barberton, yeah, that's right. I'd totally forgotten that, Ned.
He's originally a Northeast Ohio guy. And by the way, if you're further interested, if you go on TED.com, you can look up David Kelly or IDEO. There's more than one presentation there. It'll give you some other insight. If you have further questions on this process, please reach out to either Tom or myself. We're always delighted to spend some time on the phone with you and help you think about it and move forward. And Tom, again, thank you. Have a happy and safe holiday, and the same to everybody that's listened and everybody that was here. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ned, and same to you and to everybody that's listening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.